You learned to apologize for knowing things before anyone told you. You learned to second-guess the feeling in your gut that turned out to be right every single time. You learned that your way of perceiving reality made other people uncomfortable. So you dimmed it, buried it, pretended you were just like everyone else. But you weren't. You aren't. And somewhere in the archaeology of your own psyche, there is a part of you that has been waiting in the shadows for permission to emerge again. The part that knew, the part that saw, the part that felt the truth of situations before the facts ever arrived to confirm it. Jung called this the differentiated function of intuition, and he understood something the world around you did not. That you were not broken, you were not too sensitive, you were not imagining things. You were processing reality through channels most people never develop, and the world punished you for it because it did not understand. Let me take you back to the beginning. To the moment when you first realized your inner knowing was dangerous. Maybe you were a child who walked into a room and felt the tension between your parents before a single word was spoken. Maybe you knew your teacher was lying when she smiled and said everything was fine. Maybe you told your mother what you felt and she looked at you with confusion or fear or irritation and said, "You're too much. You think too much. Stop being so dramatic." And in that moment, something inside you made a decision, a survival decision. If being yourself means being rejected, then you will become someone else. You will learn to ignore the whispers from your own depths. You will replace your inner oracle with external validation. You will ask everyone else what they think before you dare to trust what you know. And this is where the split begins, the severance from your own soul's voice. Jung spent decades documenting this pattern. He saw it in his patients again and again. Individuals, particularly women who had learned early that their intuitive perception was not a gift but a liability. They came to him exhausted, anxious, disconnected from themselves, living through a fog of other people's opinions and expectations. And when he traced the wound back to its origin, he found the same story. The child who knew too much, who felt too deeply, who saw what others could not see, and who learned that survival meant hiding that light, dimming that awareness, pretending to be less than what they were. You know this story because you lived it. The moment you stopped trusting what you knew without knowing how. The moment you began seeking permission to feel what you already felt, to see what you already saw, to know what you already knew. And the cost of that betrayal has been immense. Because when you abandon your inner knowing, you do not simply lose a skill. You lose your orientation to reality itself. You begin to live through projection rather than presence. You look to others to tell you what is true, what is real, what is worth trusting. And the exhaustion of that is unbearable. The constant scanning of faces for approval, the endless questioning of your own perceptions, the anxiety that comes from being disconnected from your own ground. You have been living in exile from yourself, and you have been doing it for so long that you forgot there was ever another way. But your psyche did not forget. It has been preparing for this moment, the moment when you would be ready to reclaim what was buried. The moment when the pain of staying hidden became greater than the fear of being seen. This is not a random stirring. The fact that you are here, reading these words, feeling something shift inside you, is evidence that your soul is ready. Jung understood that the psyche has its own intelligence, its own timing. It knows when you are strong enough to face what has been repressed. It knows when the conditions are right for the buried self to emerge. And if you are feeling the call right now, if something inside you is waking up and demanding to be acknowledged, then you are standing at a threshold. The threshold between the life you have been living and the life you were always meant to live. Between the false self that learned to hide and the true self that has been waiting in the darkness for you to return. But before we can move forward, we must name the spell that was cast upon you. The collective conditioning that taught you to fear your own intuition. This is not personal. This is ancient. For centuries, the feminine principle of inner knowing has been suppressed, ridiculed, pathologized. The woman who knew things without proof was called a witch. The woman who trusted her inner vision was called hysterical. The woman who refused to abandon her own depths for the comfort of the collective was ostracized, silenced, sometimes destroyed. And even though the language has changed, the pattern remains. The world still does not know what to do with those who see beyond the veil, those who trust the invisible, those who refuse to wait for external validation before they claim their own truth. Jung recognized the High Priestess as the archetype of this inner knowing, she who sits at the threshold between the conscious and the unconscious, she who guards the mysteries, she who does not speak until she has listened to the depths. She is not loud, she is not defensive, she does not need to prove what she knows, she simply knows. And she trusts that knowing with a certainty that requires no external confirmation. This is the energy that was suppressed in you. This is the archetype that went into hiding when the world told you that your way of perceiving was wrong. But archetypes do not die. They wait. And when the conditions are right, they rise again. Your intuition was never the problem. The problem was a world that could not hold the power of your perception. A world that needed you to be smaller, quieter, more manageable. A world that feared what it could not control. And so you learned to distrust the very thing that could have saved you. You learned to treat your intuition as if it were the enemy, when in fact it was your most loyal guide. And now, after years of abandonment, after years of seeking outside yourself for what was always within, you are being called back. Back to the inner altar, back to the voice that needs no permission. Back to the knowing that has been waiting for you all along. This is the pain, the diagnosis, the recognition of what was lost and why it was lost. You did not fail. You adapted. You survived. But survival is not the same as living. And what is stirring in you now is the demand to live, to reclaim the part of yourself that was exiled. To meet the High Priestess within and let her teach you what you have forgotten. That you can trust yourself. That your knowing is valid. That you were never too much, you were always exactly enough. And the world that could not hold you was simply too small. You have been living with a stranger inside you. Jung called it the shadow, not evil, not demonic, but everything you had to disown to be accepted. Every intuitive flash you dismissed, every moment you knew something and pretended you didn't. Every time you felt the truth of a situation but smiled and nodded instead. All of that went somewhere. It didn't disappear. It became the shadow, the unlived life, the unspoken knowing, the part of you that watches from behind your eyes and wonders when you will finally stop pretending. And here is what most people never understand about the shadow. It is not your enemy. It is your power in exile. Everything you buried to survive contains the very energy you need to truly live. The High Priestess archetype lives in that shadow space. She is the keeper of what you know but have not yet claimed. She sits at the threshold between your conscious performance and your unconscious truth, between who you pretend to be and who you actually are. And she has been waiting. Not patiently, not quietly, but with the kind of presence that eventually becomes impossible to ignore. You feel her when you wake at 3 in the morning with a knowing you cannot explain. When you meet someone and instantly understand their wounds without a word being spoken. When you sense the trajectory of a situation long before it unfolds and watch it happen exactly as you knew it would. That is her. That is the part of you that never stopped seeing. She simply learned to see in silence. Jung spent decades studying how the psyche protects itself through splitting. When a part of you becomes too dangerous to express, consciousness does something remarkable. It doesn't destroy that part. It hides it, buries it beneath layers of acceptable behavior and learned responses. You become two people, the one the world can tolerate and the one who knows too much. And the tragedy is not the split itself. The tragedy is forgetting that the split happened. You begin to believe the performance is the truth. You think the edited version of yourself is all there is. But the High Priestess remembers. She holds the memory of your wholeness. And every time you feel that ache of inauthenticity, every time you speak words that taste like lies even though they are technically true, every time you betray your own knowing to keep the peace, she feels it. The shadow grows heavier, not with darkness, but with unlived light. Stop watching. Go to the comments and write, "I see my shadow." Do it now. The integration Jung spoke of is not about becoming someone new. It is about becoming someone whole. It is the alchemical process of bringing what was hidden back into the light. Not to parade it, not to prove it, but to live from it. To let your intuition inform your choices instead of apologizing for it. To trust what you know without needing 5 people to confirm it first. To stop performing certainty when you feel doubt and stop performing doubt when you feel certain. This is the return. The High Priestess does not demand that you become louder or more aggressive or more masculine in your knowing. That is not integration. That is another costume, another way of hiding. She invites you into a different kind of power, the power of receptivity, of listening so deeply to your own inner voice that external noise becomes irrelevant, of being so rooted in your own knowing that you do not need to defend it or explain it or justify it. You simply know, and that knowing becomes the ground you stand on. But here's where most people stumble. They confuse intuition with anxiety. They think every racing thought and fearful premonition is their inner wisdom speaking. It is not. Anxiety is the voice of unprocessed fear. It speaks in urgency and catastrophe. It demands immediate action to prevent imagined disaster. Intuition is different. Intuition is calm. Even when it brings difficult information, it does not panic. It simply knows. It feels like recognition, not revelation. Like remembering something you forgot, not discovering something new. When true intuition speaks, your body relaxes even if your mind resists. There is a sense of rightness that needs no argument. Anxiety tightens, intuition opens. Anxiety spins stories, intuition offers clarity. Learning to distinguish between them is the work. It is the daily practice of sitting with yourself long enough to hear which voice is which, of noticing what happens in your body when fear speaks versus when knowing speaks. This is not a skill you master in a weekend workshop. This is a relationship you build over years, with yourself, with the part of yourself that has always been trustworthy but was taught not to trust itself. The High Priestess teaches through silence, through the space between thoughts, through the moment before you speak when you know what is true and have not yet decided whether to say it. She lives in that pause. And the more you honor that pause, the more you learn to inhabit it, the stronger her voice becomes. Not louder, stronger. There is a difference. Loud is compensation. Strength is presence. You do not need to shout your knowing. You need to trust it enough to let it guide you, even when no one else understands, even when you cannot explain it, even when it makes no logical sense but every cellular sense. This is the reclamation. This is what it means to meet the High Priestess within and let her teach you what the world tried to destroy. That your inner authority is real. That you do not need permission to know what you know. That the voice inside you that has been whispering your whole life is not madness or imagination or wishful thinking. It is you. The part of you that was never confused, never lost, never broken, just buried. Jung understood that the psyche does not heal by addition. It heals by retrieval. You do not need to become more intuitive. You need to stop pretending you are not. You do not need to develop your inner knowing. You need to stop abandoning it every time it becomes inconvenient. The High Priestess is not a skill to acquire. She is a presence to remember. And she is already here, already active, already speaking. The question is whether you are finally ready to listen, whether you are willing to orient your life around your own inner truth instead of the endless chorus of external opinions, whether you can bear the loneliness of trusting yourself when no one else does. Because that is what this costs, not everything, but something. It costs the false belonging you have been clinging to, the safety of being like everyone else, the comfort of never having to stand alone in your knowing. Jung called this individuation, the process of becoming who you actually are instead of who you were trained to be. And it is not optional. Not if you want to live. Not if you want to stop feeling like a stranger in your own life. The High Priestess does not force this process. She simply makes the alternative unbearable. She makes the performance so exhausting that eventually you have no choice but to drop it. And in that dropping, you find her, waiting, as she always was, with the keys to your own depths, with the map back to yourself, with the reminder that you were never lost. You were only looking in the wrong direction, outward instead of inward, toward validation instead of toward truth. And now the direction changes. Now you turn toward the altar within, the one you were always meant to tend, the one that holds your knowing, your seeing, your depth. The High Priestess does not ask you to be perfect. She asks you to be real, to stop editing your truth for palatability, to trust what you feel even when you cannot prove it, to honor your inner voice even when it whispers against the roar of consensus. This is the integration, the return of the exiled self, the reunion with the part of you that never stopped knowing. And it begins now. Not when you are ready, not when you are certain, but now, in this moment, with this recognition that you are not broken, you are not too much, you are simply awake. And the High Priestess has been waiting for you to remember